a lot of you've probably heard we're kind of going through something that we went through like in the 90s. They started, phasing out equipment. Everybody was, running around kind of freaked out because we were doing away with R22 equipment and we were bringing in R410A equipment. And this reminds me a lot of that, in that now the comfort cooling equipment, R410A and so forth, is now switching to a new design, A2L refrigerant types. And again, very similar. We're going to have, hold on, let me see if I can get this out of my way. No, that didn't work. All I got is Hollis, and that's scary. There you go. Let's see. Are you still getting my screen?
Yeah, we still see you. We see your screen.
Okay. All right. Anyway, this reminds me a lot of that. But essentially, what's going on is they're phasing out the equipment. We're bringing in other refrigerants, R32, R54B, things like that. But there's still going to be some R50, or excuse me, R10A around for a while. So don't misunderstand and think all of a sudden, boom, they just stopped making the R410A refrigerant. They're transitioning the equipment over to the new refrigerant. We're now looking at these A2L refrigerants. They're transitioning over to that, and probably their main reason is you can kind of see their logic. They're kind of phasing it over little by little. The refrigerants will hang around, and then like with R22, all you've got is the recycled refrigerants, things like that. So at some point, R22 is going to be ridiculously expensive anyway, if you can get it. So people will go, some people will have the R410A, and then some people will go to the new stuff. I think one of the biggest things that's going on right now is people get a little bit nervous when they see that the A2L refrigerants, it'll say low toxicity, but slightly or mildly flammable. And I think that worries some people, or something like that. We're worried about, oh, if we get a leak, something's going to catch on fire. The thing is, with this stuff, it's hard to ignite it. And it would take a high concentration of the refrigerant and exposures to a flame probably for that to ever occur. And I think what we're talking about residentially, it's not as big of an issue. It's not going to be as big an issue for us when we're out here doing houses. However, some of us do multifamily, some of us do light commercial, things like that. So I thought I would point out a few things. The concern would be, and I've actually had this happen. I worked in a place in the 80s, and I had stored in one room 18 cans of 50 pounds of R22. So if I had 18 cans of some of the A2L products in there, it might be a bit of an issue. So if you're out there inspecting and you go into a storage area and you see some of that equipment sitting around, kind of stacked up, and if you're in a big complex, sometimes that's not unusual. They'll buy a lot of stuff in bulk. They'll get a really good price, and then they might have the refrigerant sitting around as well. If you see that, that might be something to pay close attention to, and perhaps put in your report that they might need to, to follow a few guidelines. I'll show you what the guidelines are here in just a minute. By the way, before I get off of this slide, because I'm just looking at this one slide here, I want to point out something. As the R410A equipment is still out there, it's still in being sold, or excuse me, being installed, maybe an HVAC guy bought a bunch of it for stuff. You can still install that. I believe the date is still January 1st, 2028. So we still got a little ways going. So don't freak out if you see some new stuff. The guy might have had it in stock. That happens a lot with HVAC. People will do that because they don't want to have to deal with, the transitioning things over and so forth. So they'll buy extra equipment. Let's see if I can get this. All right, what we're mainly concerned with, what I'm again, what I'm talking about is I'm mainly concerned with the idea that these big places might have a lot of this stuff in storage. Most of the storage stuff is kind of regulated by the locality. Now, the National Fire Prevention Association has some rules and regs, and a lot of guys will go by that or whatever. The cities and states will go by that. But it may require that they need to get a permit to have that much of this stuff stored. It can't be stored in places where there are open flames. I mean, I've seen refrigerants in boiler rooms. So you kind of keep that in mind if you should happen to have a situation like that commercially. You might have a situation where we could get a spark or something to set some of this stuff off. They might require to just put some identification placards up and some things like that to let people know what's going on in the room, and even things like no smoking signs. And in some cases, like the fire department, first responders or stuff will be notified because this stuff will be there. And in the event of a fire, again, mildly flammable, but it could go. And if it goes off, and we got firemen in there, we could end up having some people hurt. Some of the stuff is like the same products that we get off of some plastics that burn, the plastic bottles that we're the big deal with the plastic bottles right now and things like that. A lot of this stuff can come from this. And so they may be needing to let the firemen know in this particular case. But as I said, typically day-to-day home inspection stuff, it's probably not going to be a real issue out there. Now the tradesman will have some issues. He'll go through some additional training, things like the threads are left-handed threads and things like that on devices. They're trying to keep them from putting the hoses on the wrong stuff and contaminating the hoses. Back in the day, you had R22 and that was pretty much it. Nowadays, we got all kinds of different stuff, and the guys will have multiple gauges, multiple sets of hoses, all that kind of stuff, because they don't want to contaminate it. But that doesn't involve us at all. Now, I've had some guys say, well, I'm going to identify this stuff and I'm going to tell them it's going to cost a whole lot. I'm going to tell you right now, all of it's going to cost a lot, because as the R410A, is still being used to top off some things and stuff, that price is going to start going up as well. So, the new stuff is already expensive. I just compared a couple of 20-pound cans a little bit ago, and they were both like up and around $400 for the A2L stuff that I was comparing to the R410A. So this stuff isn't cheap. Back in the day, it was dirt cheap. I mean, I used to buy a 30-pound can for $35. A 30-pound can of R22 today probably be $1,000 or something. It's just crazy. But we would top this stuff off real quick. We'd throw it into a piece of equipment quickly, get it going again, and we'd be up the road. And next year we would come back and top it off again, because sometimes it just took too long to identify or to locate the leak. It's a labor, a labor fee charge. It's just going to be too much for folks. So don't get them all freaked out about the cost and stuff. The bottom line is it's all going to be expensive. And I can tell you the HVAC guys are already talking about it, that their guys are having to go through so much more training to use all this stuff. They're having to deal with stuff now that, storage capacity is different. The processes, the way we handle it on the trucks, we got to keep, try to keep it below 125 degrees, things like that. So there's a lot of stuff that the technicians are going to have to know. As far as the tech guys go, they're going to go get more education. They're going to get more credentials, and they're going to go up higher and higher and higher in their service fees. The only thing I would say, if I was giving my client, my home inspection client, some good advice, tell them don't hire some dude moonlighting around here at night, because there are ways to get stuff. I don't care how hard you try to keep it out of people's hands, there's ways to get it, but they might not understand how to use it. And in this particular stuff, they could cause some serious damage. Just about any refrigerant you can cause damage, because just overcharging or something like that, you can cause some damage. But this stuff is getting a little more technical. And so on the HVAC guy side, hey, they're going to get more and more money. And right now, tradesmen are in high demand. We can't get enough HVAC guys. We're having a hard time getting plumbers, electricians and all that stuff. And I think everybody's going to be charging more. So I don't know that how much you want to get into, hey, this stuff's going to cost a whole lot more, but at some point here, you're going to just, R22 is going to be out of sight. You're not going to be able to get it anymore. At some point, it'll be gone. R22, it's already super expensive. R410A is going to be bad, just like R22 is probably going to follow the same pattern. And the goal of this is to get us down to where we're trying to knock down HFC usage, this type of refrigerant, to about 85%. And I think it's 2036. So it's got a little bit of time yet, but we're trying to bring this usage down. It's all about global warming and, the environmental concerns that we have with it.
So, Kenny, is it also a shortage? I mean, are we seeing a nationwide shortage of these of the 454B?
Well, we might be running into that because some of the stuff is not made locally. It's not made in the United States, so we might find that. We might have some things with tariffs and stuff like that that make it bad. I haven't seen. But guys, really, I'm not out there in the field every day. I mean, I'm old, I'm beat up. I don't go out there. I just hired a guy the other day to come and make a repair in my bathroom. And I was like, I can't believe I'm paying a guy to do this, but I'm too beat up to do it. I can talk about it, but I'm just too beat up nowadays to do that. So we will see that it'll come along. If you want to give me an email from time to time, our school has joined the Air Conditioning Contractors of America. I've got us into that school, so we're going to try to keep up with the HVAC stuff more and maybe put together some HVAC stuff online. We'd like to boost our classes up a little bit anyway. But if you think there's something going on that I should know about or something that you want me to research for you, I'm happy to do it. I'm always looking for stuff.
Kenny, Sean is telling us here that he just talked to an HVAC tech who told him that he just bought the last 50-pound can within a 20-store area around DC.
It's a possibility because there's stuff that may. Remember, we're at the very beginning of this, and a lot of guys have probably rushed out and bought a whole lot of it, and then we've got the concerns with the tariffs and things like that. So a lot of guys are probably worried that they're going to run out. Without this refrigerant, we ain't doing a whole lot. That's just the way it is. That stuff is critical. And I mean, we'll still get calls on the other stuff for a while, but the new refrigerants, it is definitely, definitely critical. So anyway, I just wanted to give you a heads up. The main thing I hear about it is, oh, it's flammable.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's really slightly flammable unless I said they basically say, hey, you got to work at it, to get it to catch fire. But if you had a whole bunch of cans in a room, I don't know what you're seeing on my slide here, but I got a whole bunch of cans in a room and I got a bunch of that equipment sitting there. And I will tell you something about the new stuff. It's more efficient. It's more efficient than the R410A, and R410A was fine. R410A was a little better. Those of us that have involved in the equipment, we've noticed that coil designs have changed. You're not seeing a lot of equipment now with like 180-degree elbows and stuff like that. We're using entire plates are receiving metered refrigerant that's taking these smaller coils and making them more efficient.
So Kenny, when they made the change from R22 to the 420 or the 410A, the R410A ran at a higher pressure. Therefore, people were required to change the equipment. You couldn't run the new refrigerant in the old equipment.
Well, I know, and you really shouldn't. Here's where one of the big misconceptions is. People said, well, they kept thinking we can take R410A and put it in R22 equipment. There was a lot of things that you couldn't do that with because the oil has to be compatible. And in some cases, the oil won't be compatible. But the confusion was people just assumed for a long time, oh, I'll just drop R410A in there. And you couldn't do that. But there are and were drop-in refrigerants that you could replace the 22. But for a long time, guys would just top off the units with the 22. And people say, well, you know, I mean, even HVAC guys would tell everybody, hey, you can't top off a unit. It's against the law. That was crap. You could top off the unit unless the equipment used 50 pounds or more. There's not going to be any residential equipment that uses that. You know, it's just, it would get kind of tangled up. And what better way to try to sell somebody on new equipment is to tell them, well, I can't top you off anymore because I'll lose my license. And people didn't do any research and didn't realize that that was bull. And a lot of times, if all you needed was, honest to God, a pound of refrigerant, you know, to keep you going for another year, that was probably the best way to go. But a lot of guys will evacuate these things, change the oil in them. They were putting new oil in, and then they were going from, you know, one refrigerant to like R22 to MO99 and stuff like that. And it was fine. You know, it would work. It would do the job. But I think the confusion was when they said, well, we're going from R22 to R410A, they were really talking about the design of the equipment. The equipment itself, it had to be designed for it. The equipment, like you said, much higher pressure, about 60% higher pressure, but there were other things. A lot of the newer refrigerants are a blend. So you actually, when you put your gauges on there and you're looking, if I put gauges on a unit with R22 in it, and let's say it's been sitting somewhere and I know that unit is 70 degrees, I can tell you exactly what the pressure would be in that thing, like a container or whatever. I know exactly what it's going to be. It can be a little bit different when the equipment's running with the newer refrigerants in it because it's a mixture of two refrigerants or more. And we actually refer to the numbers as a glide. You know, the numbers can kind of go up and down. There's a lot of things we have to take into consideration because on R22, you would charge as a gas. You would set your can up and charge off the top of the can. R410A, for instance, you needed to turn the can upside down and charge as a liquid because there was different refrigerants in the can mixed. But when you started drawing it off the top of the can, it would separate. So you would be taking one kind out and leaving another in the can.
So Kenny, when the R22 went out and the R410A came in, I mean there was a transition period, a phase out period, but there was a drop dead date. And
they quit making R22 a year or so ago, a couple of years ago. They quit making it, and so now anything that you're using is recycled. You know, basically recycled.
But my point is, though, that going forward, we're going through a similar process. And correct me if I'm wrong, but there's no more any R410A equipment being manufactured after the first of the year. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was supposed to have stopped. You shouldn't be manufacturing the equipment, but there was inventory, and so some of that inventory will still go out here. And the date looks to me like it's January 1, 2028. And that's basically giving them 3 years to get rid of that stuff.
So are we overreacting by putting these flammable stickers on, you know, labels on the equipment, or is that required? Flammable labels
I mean, if the HVAC guy wants to put it in there, that's fine. I don't think it's the home inspector's business. You know, it's just, like I said, in some cases, you would have to have that stuff bellowing out there and holding a torch in it to try to get it to light, because it's just not that easy. You know, people think it's going to be that easy and they're getting all worked up about it.
But you understand it's not that label is not a requirement.
Not that again, a lot of this is local stuff, but I haven't heard of any localities making them do it.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, it was just like, you remember the locking caps?
Yeah. Yeah.
You could be in some cities and you would see them not on there, and you would, you know, say something, and some cities just said, man, you know, I don't care. You know, some of that stuff just wasn't as big a deal as it can get, you know, sensationalized and kind of blown out of proportion.